There are slaves in Nebraska today. And just for a little bit of perspective, we'll take a little walk down memory lane. Now, Nebraska has never been a slave state, but when it became a free state in 1861, slavery had to be abolished, and at that time, the number of known slaves were 13 slaves in this state who needed to be freed or moved in order for Nebraska to become a free state. In contrast, you look at the number of known slaves in Nebraska today, a conservative estimate would be 1,200. 1,200. This is according to the governor's task force on human trafficking that was released this summer. And when the police were asked, do you think this is a reasonable number, those who are closest to the situation, they said, oh yeah, that's a conservative number. And higher estimates have been around 3,000 human slaves in Nebraska today. I couldn't believe this. I asked, how does it happen? How are people connected to these people in the sex industry? And I'm told that it's really easy to find on the internet. I'm told that they advertise publicly. I'm told that the numbers of humans trafficked in Omaha and Lincoln swells dramatically during the College World Series and during Husker games as people come in from out of town are looking for a good time. I'm told that the intersection of I-80 and I-29 makes us a prime location for the trade of human flesh, and it happens in large numbers right here underneath our noses. Besides strip clubs, prostitution rings oftentimes masquerade as escort services, and they advertise in the yellow pages and on the internet. The governor's task force did a study on escort services in Omaha, and they were able to find escort services who advertise publicly in Omaha number 38. 38. They're just doing it right out there publicly. And I thought when you would look at where the locations are of them, that you'd find most of them along the river in East Omaha, West Council Bluffs. It wasn't true. It was evenly spread throughout the entire metro area. 7 of them in Elkhorn. Escort services. This is a crime of the white collar and the blue collar. In fact, one former escort service owner who was interviewed said that her biggest time of day was between 9 and 5. And her girls made house calls to offices, and business guys would stop by during a supposed appointment or a long lunch. But these girls are bought and sold and traded and used. You may wonder just how much a human slave sells for. I wasn't able to come up with Nebraska numbers, but there are numbers on an average price for slaves worldwide. Worldwide, the average price of a slave today is $90. Imagine that, selling a little girl, a human being, for $90. This is a cheap price compared to what's happened in the past. If you think back to 1850s, when there were slaves in the American South, and you wonder if a slave was sold on auction, how much would they be worth in today's dollars? How much were they bought for? They were bought for $40,000. What that means is back in that day, slaves were treated with a lot more respect because they were a valuable commodity. Today's slaves are just a throwaway commodity. Something to be manipulated and forced and coerced, and when they're no longer profitable, just discarded when they're finished. And because these kids and girls mostly endure such abuse, the average lifespan of a girl who enters into prostitution, usually at about 13 years old, average lifespan is 7 years. 7 years. 20 years old, they're likely to die if they enter into prostitution. Some of these girls are imported from other nations. The estimated number of foreign nationals trafficked into the United States just this year is 17,500 girls. Now, I heard a report from one law enforcement officer that it's estimated that 200 girls from the United States every month are exported into other countries as well. Kind of the center of the human trafficking trade is the nation of Moldova in Eastern Europe. Many Eastern European countries that are deep in poverty make for easy victims to be transported into other nations. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people from other places, thousands of stories of American kids too. Most of them are girls who do not have stable families, girls that are wandering the streets in foster care, ward of the state, or homeless or without involved parents. They're snatched out of malls and bus stations and off the streets by these evil brokers in humanity. If you're a student here and your parents are a little bit hyper about where you're at night and wanting to know where you are, they're not crazy. I mean, there really are evil people out there who would do you harm. I keep talking about girls and kids, and the reason is that female victims are 80% of the victims of human trafficking. Child victims are 50% of the victims of human trafficking. And that here in the United States, those who are at risk for being trafficked number about 244,000 people. Serious risk for sexual exploitation. Friends, I look at these things and they're numbers on a screen, but when I think about people, this is simply unconscionable. Can you imagine this happening to somebody you know? Can you imagine if this continues to be on the rise the way that it has been in the past? If nobody stops this, if nobody speaks for the oppressed, if nobody protests, then it'll simply continue growing like a weed, and it will fester and infect and destroy our culture, taking life after life after life of young women. 1,200 human slaves in our state, in Nebraska. We can't just sit idly by and watch this happen. If the people of God know about this kind of injustice, then we must respond to this injustice.